Ron's going to be the expert for this part of the field, but these squash and tomatoes were planted a couple months ago, and I want y'all to know it was like 120 degrees and no rain like y'all have all been experiencing. So if you see missing plants in the plots, that's simply because even with 24 hours of drip and us watering them in, we were still losing transplant. Nature sometimes just takes them out. So don't look at like if one plot has more or less plants, that doesn't have anything to do with the herbicide spray, okay? And then, so as we've been just growing them and maintaining them, 2 weeks out from this workshop, we started spraying our 4 herbicides. So we have 4 herbicides sprayed out here, 2,4-D, dicamba, paraquat, and Roundup, and Ron will tell you more about that. And we have a control plot, okay? And so what we're going to use is we're going to use anything with the signs facing us. You see how some of these have the little logos on the bottom? And it tells you what chemical was sprayed on it right there. So Ron's going to walk y'all through the field and explain the symptoms and kind of what we're seeing and why we're seeing it.
So the reason we're doing this is because there's some new technology that's been out for several years. Roundup Ready, glyphosate's been out there forever. And with the constant use of glyphosate, we're seeing a lot of resistance with broadleaves especially. Palmer amaranth is one that comes to mind. Johnson grass is another one we're seeing some resistance. But through the years, we've developed some resistance problems, especially with the broadleaves like Palmer amaranth. Palmer amaranth makes about 1 million seeds per plant. Seeds can live for 30 to 50 years in the soil. So a lot of potential for populations to reach levels that you can just take over a field. So they developed technology where you could spray 2,4-D with special seeds, 2,4-D and dicamba over the top of cotton, soybeans. So since a lot of that's going on now, there's a lot of potential for drift. Oftentimes they'll plant vegetables near these crops. A lot of potential for drift. These herbicides are very prone to drift. And so that's what we're kind of simulating here, although I think this is more of a simulation of a direct shot. Direct shot which occurs. I work complaints where it's a direct shot. I'll tell you, when it's a direct shot, that is very hard to figure out sometimes because the symptoms, dead is dead. Sometimes it's hard to figure out what caused the death. And so we're seeing a little bit of that here, but there are some things that we key on when it comes to 2,4-D. There's some things that we key on when it comes to glyphosate, paraquat, and so we're going to go through the plots and talk about it. Look at the weeds also. When I walk into a field and I see a drift problem, I look at the crops, of course, that are damaged, but I look at certain weeds. Like, for instance, if you walk into a crop and you see the broadleaves devastated, only the broadleaves, the grasses look great, well, likely a non-selective herbicide didn't get sprayed. That wasn't the culprit. So that's what I look for. Like the plot you're seeing right here, this is dicamba, which is a broadleaf killer. It's only going to control broadleaves, and so that's kind of what we look for. Another thing I want you to do is kind of look at the untreated checks, and we have the yellow flags here. This is what it should look like, and as Kiki talked about, this has gone through a lot of environmental stress. That is also affecting the performance of our herbicides and what we're seeing here, and we're also simulating a direct hit here. Up at the Red River Research Station next May, we're going to be simulating more of a drift, and we'll have a number of more crops, I believe, up there. And so we're going to be simulating more of a drift situation, kind of more of the classic symptoms. These symptoms are not always classic, what we're going to see here in the next few minutes. You have to start looking at some of the subtle things here. So if you could, come out and just take a look at the tomatoes here, the yellow flags here. These are untreated, unsprayed. Just see how they look. Notice the damage. Some of them may have a little disease. Some of them may have a little frost damage because we had a frost. Look at these. And then we have we have the yellow. We have squash over here with yellow flags. So again, don't look at any damage right now. Put this picture in your mind of the untreated. Right. Yeah. The untreated. Don't even glance at these over here, Yeah. Don't even look directly at them for a second here. All right. But go over here to these yellow flags.
So yellow's going to be untreated?
Yellow is untreated. So look, environmental damage on the squash. Environmental damage on the squash here. Keep that in mind as you're looking. We have environmental damage on the squash, just frost. And so that's burning back some leaves. It's in rough shape, so it's hard to key out anything on these squash, really, but there are some things that we're going to look for. This is dicamba. Dicamba is a broadleaf killer, and dicamba, not exactly sure, they're not totally sure exactly how it works. They know that it causes just some, it mimics auxin, and so that auxin causes this crazy growth in the plant, and it affects the phloem, it affects everything. It's just uncontrolled growth would be a good way to describe it. Abnormal growth on broad leaves, doesn't affect grasses pretty much at all. And so what you would see when you walk into a field, you're going to see a broadleaf crop, and you should see this twist to this broadleaf crop. So this is 2 weeks after the application of a direct hit, and this would be a week after the application. See this twist, this abnormal twist that you see here? That is that uncontrolled growth that we would look for. And you can also see another thing here with dicamba, banfol, other names. You will see this cupping occurring. The leaves want to cup on the plant, and so these are not classic symptoms that we see here, but oftentimes I'm keying on the weeds that are out there. I look at the grasses here. This crabgrass looks really good. Even though it went through a frost, it looks pretty good. I look over here, the barnyard grass looks good. So I know a broadleaf killer hit this field right here, and I see that twisting. So really the thing is this 2,4-D, is this dicamba? That's the hard part to figure out. If I had some legumes out here, if the legumes were crushed pretty hard, I would say this is dicamba. I know this is dicamba because the sign says it, but it makes it a little difficult. Dicamba is also pretty hot on most broadleaves, and so we're seeing that. It's nailing this swine crest pretty well here in the field. It looks like it missed one right here, but it's a broadleaf killer, and so you would see other broadleaves damaged pretty hard. You'd see the twisting on the broadleaves. Some broadleaves are more susceptible than others. The legumes would be very susceptible to dicamba. So 2 weeks, 1 week, and 3 days. Even at 3 days, 3 days after treatment. So we have some frost damage here, but look at this. Look at this. These are really more of the classic symptoms that I look for. This twisting right here that's occurring. This is great, great symptoms right here. A great photo opportunity right here. Another thing I'm seeing is this weird growth right here. See that? See this unusual cupping right here? That's not normal. And also the ends become serrated on this plant. See that? So just some unusual growth occurring. A plant is essentially growing itself to death when it's sprayed with either 2,4-D or dicamba, and that's what we have occurring right here. So we're going to walk through the field.
And I would say too, that's where sometimes, we can get confused sometimes thinking like maybe herbicide drift. This is more like, we spray these pretty hard, okay? But you think maybe it's a virus, right? Because you get that weird kind of strapped growth in the top. But then if you look, virus wouldn't have the curled stems also with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's why I don't always look at just the plants that are damaged, the vegetable crop. Look at the broadleaves here that are twisting, this swine crest. See that? A disease also not likely going to cross over and get your weed too. So see how the twisting is occurring here? This has only been 3 days. These are more classic symptoms right here than what we're seeing over here. So they're fast acting. I know with 2,4-D, with a susceptible crop like tomatoes, you can see the damage within hours, really. Within minutes, you'll start to see that twisting. That it's called epinasty. And that twisting really starts to occur very, very quickly, especially in good growing conditions. I know they've had some cool weather that slowed some of the metabolism of these herbicides too. And so we're seeing some unusual symptoms, but this is more of the classic symptoms that you see with dicamba. Again, keying on the broadleaves too. A non-selective herbicide would be nailing the grasses. Swine crest is in the mustard family. It's real susceptible to 2,4-D and dicamba. That's a good one to key on. It's a cool season broadleaf. So as we walk down, so paraquat, also a non-selective herbicide, but paraquat is a fast-acting herbicide. It causes membrane disruption, cell leakage. It occurs very quickly within 24 hours after you apply it, especially in sunny days. So paraquat's a fast-acting contact herbicide. Glyphosate is a translocating herbicide. This is a fast-acting contact herbicide. So these squash were sprayed over. This is, I believe, 1 week after application. and you can see this fast-acting herbicide burned the squash back, burned the leaves back. These squash were very mature at this time. They're likely not going to recover from it, but there's no translocation of this herbicide into the root system. It just burned it back, and they were already stressed, so they're not recovering. But you can see it on the weeds here. This is swine cress, and you can see the leaves burned back on the swine cress. You can see a lot of new growth right here. It doesn't translocate into new growth. Whatever it gets sprayed on, that's what it burns back. If you look at the glyphosate, glyphosate is a translocating herbicide. It hits the leaves, translocates all through the plant. Usually you start seeing it in the growing points. You'll start seeing yellowing in the growing points. This is more so simulating a direct hit right here. And you can see it is absolutely crushing these tomatoes, crushing the tomatoes. I believe the way they did it was they sprayed one side and then they sprayed another side. Look at the weeds here. The weeds are all devastated too. Non-selective herbicide was paraquat.
This is Roundup.
Yes. Yeah, this is glyphosate, Roundup. Yes, those 3 plots are Roundup. So what you're seeing here is the grasses and the broadleaves are dead, not just keying on the damaged plants. But this has been 2 weeks. They're kind of simulating if you were trying to control weeds with a pump-up sprayer. And on the other side, a pump-up sprayer, and you can see, I don't know anybody that can do that well without having some damage with something blowing in with a herbicide that doesn't take a lot to cause a problem. And a day like today, could you see that happening? You know, you pump that pump-up sprayer, one more pump, and there'd be a huge explosion, you know, because you got it pumped up so much. And so you're out here with these fine droplets spraying. That's what can occur right there. And that's a self-inflicted kind of thing. And we see that a lot. You know, somebody sprays, somebody drifted onto me, actually self-inflicted, you know. So this is with glyphosate, this is 2 weeks, and that's 1 week. What I look for with glyphosate, and you can kind of see it here with some of these, and you have to look because it's not classic symptoms, but you see in the growing points, yellowing in the terminals. See that? See that yellowing? Yellowing in the terminals, and it's a translocating herbicide. If I would have sprayed it just down here, I would get that up there, even though I didn't spray it up there, because it's a translocating herbicide. And we're going to see in contrast, paraquat is not. So this is 7 days after treatment. You can see this is just a week away from looking like that. Devastation. It's too hard to try to spray, you know, alongside your plants with glyphosate. You're asking for trouble with an uncovered sprayer, and just tremendous damage potential. We're seeing this sow thistle here also is damaged. See that? It's a broadleaf killer, but it's a grass killer. If you look on along here, you don't see any living grasses either. Definitely a non-selective herbicide was sprayed here. This is 3 days out. Glyphosate works by shutting down amino acid synthesis, 3 amino acids, and so that leads to the non-production of proteins. It's a slow and steady death with glyphosate. So here, 3 days out, starting to see just a little bit of yellowing occurring, but it's going to take it a week or so to really start get going here and start showing those classic symptoms. But we are starting to see the yellowing occurring, and so 3 days out, you may not know you were damaged. A week out, you're going to probably see something's going on here. I bet this is a disease. And you start looking at your records, maybe you self-inflicted, or maybe it was a flyover. There's a lot of glyphosate crops out there, tolerant crops. If it was just a drift event, you would really see those classic symptoms of just unusual yellowing in the growing points, and underneath you'd see some yellowing as it's moving that herbicide around. It's just enough to cause a problem. You'll see stunning, you may see some blooms drop off, but you would see a lot of good-looking foliage that looks like it hadn't been hit, but in the growing points you would see some yellowing occurring, and you'd look down underneath and you'd see some yellowing occurring. If it was a directed spray and they sprayed it just down here, you'd see a lot of concentrated damage there, but you'd also see it moving up because it moves where there's activity occurring. This is the growing point of the tomatoes. There would be a lot of glyphosate concentrated in the growing point, so it's just a matter of time before it moves it up into that area.
Yeah, we put some pictures in there. So what he means by the growing point is the base of the leaves almost.
Yes, yeah. It's non-selective, and it's very good on perennial plants. It's got broadleaf activity. It's got grass activity. It's by far the best herbicide I believe ever made. Yep. But you know, this is not something you would send Winehead Willie out, and spray. Yeah. You would not do that. You'd have somebody you trust who knows how glyphosate works. Yeah. Yep, definitely.
It's very persistent on plastic, isn't it?
It can be, yeah. So glyphosate binds to the soil, especially a heavier soil. It's going to bind to the soil, but when there's plastic, if it gets on that plastic and has a chance to run down into the hole, there can be an issue with some root uptake or with some stem uptake. It's taken up by green plants, including green stems too, so there is potential for that to occur. Visualize this. You see it's translocating. Here we have paraquat, and this is of course squash. This is 2 weeks after treatment. Likely had some cool weather here. Paraquat burns what it hits, and whatever it does not hit, you may not see any damage at all, because it doesn't move in the plant. It's like a frost hitting a plant. It burns, it causes cell membrane disruption, and that's it. It sprays, you get the damage. Like I was telling you, it causes that leakage, cell leakage, membrane disruption. It's active in photosystem 1. And when that occurs, there's free radicals. There's all kinds of issues going on inside the plant. You're not just spraying it and it kills it. It's shutting down some processes, causing some issues inside the plant, and has no soil life. It's totally taken up by the roots, by the leaves and by the stems, and that's the way it works. So it's a herbicide that does its damage, and then the plants either decline or they recover. In this case, I'm going to put some money on this one, not making it. And this is 7 days after treatment. Here we're seeing some recovery right here with this squash. We're seeing some recovery. You don't see translocation into the growing points. If this were a drift situation and you just see some damage, weird looking damage out in your field, it would be spotting out in the field. And there'd be these spots, these necrotic spots, but they would have kind of a brown to red halo around those spots. And you might be able to see some of it here. I know I've spotted some on the tomatoes up here, which we might look for in a second. But you see some spotting occurring here. But with classic symptoms would be necrotic spots and a red halo around those spots. It's a non-selective herbicide. You would see damage on broadleaves, you would see damage on grasses, but I'm looking for those spots in a drift event. A direct hit, this is what you get. Just a crushing.
Is that white?
Yes. Yeah. So what you're seeing here is on these on the swine crest. This was 3 days ago, I believe. 3 days. Yeah, 3 days ago. And so you're seeing the burn effect here, and then you're not seeing any damage underneath because it burns back what it hits. That's how it works. So that's what's occurring here with the swine crest. Swine crest the leaves are getting burned back. It's very tolerant of frost, so it's definitely not the frost causing the problem. It's the paraquat. If this were glyphosate, 3 days out, you might not see anything, or you might see a little yellowing occurring. You wouldn't see a lot of symptoms 3 days out. 3 days out with paraquat, a bright sunny day, that really keeps it activated. You're going to see a lot of damage, especially, really only where those droplets hit. You'll see the damage.
3 days out.
And yeah, this is the same herbicide as was sprayed here and here.
So if you look here, and here, these three are the exact same herbicide. Same with
that's 2 weeks, that's 1 week, and that's 3 days.
But
yes.
That doesn't mean that this herbicide is this herbicide in the squash.
With what you're seeing here today? Yeah, there's been no second application of anything else out here. He's asking, did it also get something else out here? I guess there's a chance we could have a drift event out here where you're doing a drift study. I guess that's possible.
It's possible that that one right
they could have drifted, yeah. So that wouldn't be breaking new ground to have something like that happen. But I don't think it happened too much. Would you say it was?
We weren't using a shield because we were trying to hit the plant.
But was it windy when you applied it?
Well, I did the 2 weeks out, and I was in jury duty, so Alessandro did this one and this one.
Yeah.
And no, it was still. We got here super early in the morning, and it was still. So.
Yeah. So probably not, but
like
you know,
felt the wind go up,
absolutely potential was here for that to occur, but I don't think it occurred. I'm not seeing it. Yeah.
You know how it is. It's not this. Even if you didn't feel it.
Because you know that spray that they spray on rice that just turns everything white.
Okay, the question is this what they spray in rice? They might spray this, maybe, paraquat is used as a desiccant before harvest. It's also used to prep fields for burn down. You know, when you got to go out and plant, and you got all this vegetation out here. Like if I had a lot of swine cress out here and I wanted to plant this in maybe wheat or something, or get soybeans ready to plant, and you put paraquat, and I need to plant, you know, within a day, I'm going to spray something like a paraquat, burn everything back. There's no residual. You could plant right back into it. There's 0 days. And so you might use it. It's used as a burn down herbicide. Glyphosate also used as a burn down herbicide, but you got to give it a little bit more time to work. This is a spray it, get what you get kind of thing. And if it's a perennial plant, likely not going to kill it because it doesn't translocate into the root system. So it's going to hit those leaves and just burn those leaves back and not move into the root system. That's paraquat. Glyphosate is going to hit those leaves, go all over the plant, especially in the growing points where there's activity occurring, go down into the root system. That's why it's so good on perennial plants. It's such a good herbicide, you know, broad spectrum. Yep. So
Really, I think that's Command that turns everything.
Oh! I thought you were talking about paraquat. Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
There's several different ones.
Yeah. Command's used as a pre-emergence in rice. Yeah, for annual grass control. Yeah, that's the way it works. It's a bleacher. Yep.
Okay.
Pre-emergence herbicide, but it has it will damage whatever it hits. It'll cause some whitening to occur. Definitely. Yep. So as we move down, we saw glyphosate. We saw glyphosate on squash, or we saw paraquat on squash. We have glyphosate here. This is 2 weeks out. I think that's dead with glyphosate. Translocated, crushed the plants, simulating spraying along each side, trying to control the weeds. Just a devastation. Some very good symptoms though here in the swine cress. See this growing point damage that we're talking about? See the yellowing right there? So don't always key out on the actual plants that are damaged. There's pigweed here that's showing some damage, but this got a direct hit right here, and you're seeing the swine cress just crushed. Also notice the grasses are crushed here, and so you know this was a non-selective herbicide. And again, this is a week out, needs a little bit more time to work. It's going to kill these plants as well, and this is 3 days out, going to kill these plants also. It's just taking a little while. So non-selective, translocates, very little potential for soil activity unless it gets on that plastic, and so that's glyphosate. And you swap over here, and what we have here, this is paraquat, side by side. This is paraquat. So this is 2 weeks out with paraquat. Paraquat, you spray it, you get that crushing, you don't get translocation. If you look at the growing points here, you don't see any yellowing. Some of these may recover. If we don't get any more frost anytime soon, some of these may recover with paraquat because it doesn't translocate in the plants. Now, if it knocked the growing point out, got a direct shot, it may kill the plant, or it may branch back out without that growing point anymore. So that's paraquat, no soil activity, non-selective, doesn't translocate in the plant, has that localized tissue damage, causes the cell leakage, game over. As you can see, as we work through here, you'll see the damage continued. Even 3 days out, this is 1 week, 3 days out, classic symptoms right here, crushed by paraquat. Even if we had warm weather, a lot of this could recover, You'll get that burn, and then you could get recovery. Now, you wouldn't harvest because it's going to affect yields, but likely will recover because it's not translocating. It won't look good. You'd want to rip them out of the field, but they might recover as a plant, and still be alive at least. With glyphosate, likely not going to recover. It's going to translocate to the growing points, cause some issues. So the thing too to look for is that halo. I'm still looking for it here. I found some last night. Here's some of it right here. So that classic symptom I was talking about, where you have a damaged area, a necrotic spot, but you have kind of a red or brown halo around it. That's paraquat, localized necrosis with that halo around it. Could be a disease, yeah. But then when you look at, you see the broadleaves have it, and the grasses have it. You would probably say no, likely not a disease. Move down, we see dicamba on tomatoes. This is something that's going to occur if it hasn't already occurred. There's a lot of crops now, like 2,4-D, dicamba, being able to apply this on soybeans and cotton. So it's not going to be unusual for that to occur, some drift to occur onto tomatoes. Tomatoes are kind of the D students of all plants when it comes to problems with the herbicide drift, especially 2,4-D. Dicamba also pretty tough on tomatoes. You see the classic twisting symptoms. with dicamba, just like you might see with 2,4-D. What we see with this one, with dicamba though, is a lot more of these cupped leaves. See the cupped leaves here? With that, you'd see this a lot more distinctive if this were more of a drift and not so much a direct hit. You'd see a lot more distinctive cupping. But you got the twisted growth here that occurs when dicamba is sprayed. And again, it is mimicking auxin, a growth hormone in the plant. The plant is essentially growing itself to death. This is 2 weeks after application. You can see a lot more damage, a lot more brown leaves here. It's moving throughout the plant, causing a lot of issues. Dicamba does have some residual activity too, and a little bit of root uptake potential. There's more of a plant back interval with dicamba, so it's one that is a terrific herbicide as far as controlling broadleaves, very good on pigweed, which is a plant that is becoming more and more resistant to glyphosate. Excellent herbicide, but you can see you wouldn't want it on your tomatoes. You would not want this at all on your tomatoes. If we go next door here, you'll see that we have squash, and let me just double check myself on this one.
Control.
Yeah, it's a control. So this is just environmental damage right here. And you know, we got a lot of that going on here. It went through a frost. It's gone through some serious drought. They couldn't hardly keep enough water on it. So it's affecting what we're seeing symptomology-wise. Here we have 2,4-D. 2,4-D, very volatile herbicide, can form a gas, cause some issues, of course. Through the years, I've worked a lot of 2,4-D complaints. This is a 2,4-D, almost pretty much what you would say is a direct hit onto our plants here, onto our squash plants. You see the twisting occurring here. A little bit more recovery than I expected, but again, these plants were very much stressed when they were applied on, and about 2 weeks, you're seeing that some of these didn't get a direct hit. When it got a direct hit, you're seeing a crushing occurring, but you are seeing that classic twisting. Look at the pigweed here. Very much, even more susceptible than the squash is this pigweed right here. Pigweed is very susceptible to 2,4-D, and it's really twisting up. Seeing some very unusual symptoms. Look at this. This is not a natural symptom right here, that twisting occurring. It looks like a ram, like a ram horn right here, that's occurring right here, but a lot of that twisting is going on. Not a natural symptom.
So when it starts to come out.
So what we're seeing too though is with 2,4-D, it looks like that the squash may be a little bit more tolerant to 2,4-D than maybe the dicamba. But you're still seeing these classic twisting, the epinasty that's occurring here. The plant's essentially growing itself to death, and eventually, especially with dicamba, it'll probably kill it, or it would be definitely going to affect yields right here. So as we move over, highly sensitive 2,4-D on tomatoes. I probably work more complaints with 2,4-D on tomatoes than I have anything else. Tomatoes are highly sensitive. We always say you can just say the word 2,4-D and tomatoes start twisting. And that's what we're seeing right here. This is 2 weeks out, and it's doing the usual twist. In the summertime, when it's hot and humid, I've seen within minutes the tomatoes start twisting, the epinasty occurring. Essentially, again, the plant's growing itself to death, and it's mimicking auxin, a growth hormone. It just can't keep up with it. It's just uncontrolled growth, abnormal growth, and that's what's occurring here. You see the swine cress here twisting up as well. It's a mustard family plant. They're pretty sensitive to 2,4-D. You see the yellowing occurring also and the twisting. You see the sedge here, unaffected by it. And there's not a lot of grasses here, but if there were some grasses here, you would see it really, the grass is unaffected. Only works on broadleaves. There's cotton that you can spray 2,4-D over the top of now. A lot of potential for tomatoes to get a drift event. We'd consider this more of a direct hit than it would be a subtle, what you would see, the subtle symptoms of a drift, which would be that twisting. The other thing that we see with tomatoes, and I've seen it with some of these, is you can take the leaves and it's like you stretched them. You grabbed them on the end and you stretched them. And they'll be long and narrow. That's called strapping, leaf strapping. You'll see that too. Not seeing those classic symptoms as much. I saw it last night. I can't find that plant. I should have marked it. But it's just like you took the end of that tomato leaf and stretched it out. So again, as you work through, you'll see 1 week out, and you'll see 3 days, already that twisting that's occurring. That really actually probably started occurring within minutes to an hour or so after application. That uncontrolled twisting epinasty that's brought on by this herbicide mimicking that hormone auxin in the plant only works on broad leaves, but you see symptoms very quickly on tomatoes, especially when 2,4-D has been sprayed accidentally on it, or in this case, on purpose.